Hello and welcome back, Sleepy Whatsit here, and I have another miniatures video for you. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some experimentation that I did, making some Warpstone glow cracked earth style bases here. So what I'm going to do is talk about the specific paints I used for this, then we're going to walk through kind of some of the different experimentation I did, discussing what worked, what didn't work, and giving you some hints and tips. I'll also be providing you with recipes, so if you want to do this on your own, you can make your own version of these. What these were inspired by was a combination of getting my hands on some Mordant earth here from Citadel, which is a crackle texture paste or paint in black. And there's been a number of tutorials going around recently about how to do cracked earth lava style bases. So this is where you do like an orangey red, yellow underbase, and then use something like Martian iron earth over top, and then dry brush that a little bit darker so it looks more like a lava crust. Very cool, very awesome. Doesn't work well for the Skaven Blood Bowl team that I'm working on currently. So because I'm working on Skaven, obviously we want to go glowstone, so kind of inspired by the gloomy dark aesthetic of Mordheim and some of the concepts that come from that, I basically came up with the idea of let's do cracked earth but with glow and glowstone underneath of it. So this is where this idea originates from and what we're going to be working through. So just kind of go through the various paints I used here just so I've shown them so you can write them down. I'll have notes down below on the recipes I use, but just so that we've shown everything. So from the Citadel line, I used Caliban green as my dark green for more classic painting. Warpstone glow is my mid-tone, and Moot green as the highlight. So whenever I'm doing, I guess, more classic style Citadel stuff, that's what I'm using. As alternatives, I also experimented with using forest green from Reaper, with a Goblin green from Vallejo, and Scorpion green from Vallejo. It worked relatively well. It's not an exact color match. Some of those greens are hard to match, but I thought it turned out decently. Later on, I moved into using a lot more of the contrast paints. So the two contrast paints that you're going to see in this video are the dark green is Dark Angel's green, and the lighter green is Warp Lightning. So these are both contrast paints. Whenever I work with contrast paints, having played around with them a bit, I tend to cut them with the medium because I find them a little bit too thick. The ball don't flow well, so I use about a 1-to-1 ratio when mixing it. So yeah, contrast medium to cut that down, and I'm willing to put 2 layers on if need be. So the idea of one thick layer isn't exactly sold on me. And then all of the contrast is based over Gray Seer. So there's no Wraithbone, there's no Corax White, as showed the Mordant Earth already for our technical paints. And then here we have, for when I do some texture painting, I used Astrogranite. So this is just, maybe I should have used Astrogranite debris instead to get a little bit more texture, but other texture pastes are available. So let's actually get into showing what's going on here. So the very first example we have here is one that was done with our traditional Citadel paints. So this is like Caliban green, Warpstone glow, and the friends. And what I've done here is based it out in Caliban green, and then create this kind of Y shape under it, with Warpstone glow, and then highlighted that with the Moot green. This actually shows up looks much better on camera, I think, than it does in real life. Well, not much better, significantly better, because in real life there's a kind of a harsh, strong line on the edges here that you can see kind of through the cracked earth. This is basically because I didn't blend it in well. When I was doing this project, because I'm doing the Skaven Blood Bowl team, this project is being done with models that are already in situ. Really didn't want to go through the hassle of clipping them all off their tabs and pinning them onto bases, so I need to be able to build this or do this basing with the models in place. So this is why I didn't airbrush it. If you were building these bases separately, you could probably use an airbrush and get some really nice blends, or wet blend this all together. But yeah, the major downside to this was the fact that it requires a bit of technical ability to get that blending, otherwise you get some sharp lines. Also, if you're foolish like me and base over black primer, Caliban green and Dark Forest green take like 3 or 4 layers to get a non-black undercoat, so I would possibly consider using a gray instead for your primer. The alternative version that I did of this, using our Scorpion Green, Goblin Green, and Forest Green non-Citadel paints, has the same basic drawbacks. I think I got the blending a little bit better in the center, so you don't have that harsh center stripe going on, but still you can see on this one how the Y shape is has a very clear defined border. You really want to feather that out a little bit for this to work. When doing this with a lava base, this type, I think you see a little bit less of this issue because you're doing red over like a different shade of red. So there's a kind of a natural feathering that occurs. Because we're doing bright green and black, there's a very harsh contrast going on there. So it doesn't hide any non-blended edges. So you just need to blend more. So my objective here is to come up with an easy way of doing this. This requires a little bit more technical ability than... Not that I couldn't put in, but I wanted to see, can we get easier than this? So so we want to go easy mode on painting. So that means contrast paints. So the next thing I did was, well, I did both of these at the same time, and I probably wouldn't have done this one at all, but we'll discuss it anyway and see what went wrong there. But so based out using gray Seer, and then I applied 2 layers of Warp Lightning to this. Why 2 layers of Warp Lightning? Well, when you lay this down and paint on a layer of Warp Lightning, it's going to pool, and what you end up with is some darker green areas and some kind of light gray areas. It doesn't have the same effect when it's on a 3D model of shading nicely. The pooling is quite difficult. It shows a lot of gray through. On the other hand, the pooling is what we want to get a more organic look to it. So putting 2 layers on it gets nice, deep, rich pools and some less saturated pools, but none of the gray showing through anymore. So that worked really well. And then we put the Mordant Earth over top of it and let it crackle. Something to be mentioned about Mordant Earth, or 2 things to be mentioned about Mordant Earth, is you have to put a lot more on it than I originally was expecting. You have to be pretty liberal with it. If you put it too thin, you get kind of a scaling texture in some areas, and then it looks like you put black primer over everything else. So that doesn't work out. Also, this stuff takes a very long time to dry. I vaguely recall something about on the Citadel website saying, or one of the tutorials saying it takes 90 minutes to dry. That, for where I live at least, is a damned lie. It was more like 6 hours, like overnight type drying, before you got a full crackle effect. So, but I've definitely seen other things that have mentioned that like this is an overnight technique. So this is an easy but not fast technique. I guess these also had more endurance, though I didn't explicitly mention that. So, yeah, this is just Warp Lightning creating a nice look under it. I really like how this turned out. My only real complaint about this is it's super flat. Like, from here, it's nice and textured looking, but when it's like, no, it's not actually textured. So when you're looking at it at an angle, it doesn't necessarily look great. So kind of my next level of experimentation is going to be trying to create a bit more texture. The other contrast paint that we did was Dark Angel's Green. You need to have the bright colors showing through to make this work. This is where the Dark Angel's Green, I think, really fell down. It's a little bit too dark. Maybe you might like this look for something else, but for what I was doing, I didn't really like it. Also, you can see here on some of the cracks, there's this kind of light white webbing. I'm pretty sure what that's from is the Dark Angel's Green wasn't fully dried when I put the Mordant Earth on it, and it kind of mixed and pulled some of that up is what's going on there, like why the cracks aren't fully formed. So, to be aware of, make sure your base layers are completely dried before trying this. So, the next thing we did was kind of the same idea as the contrast paints here, but what we're going to be doing is, before we put contrast on, adding some Astrogranite to texturize it a bit more. Astrogranite is a little bit smooth, especially once you start putting gray Seer over it. So I found the actual 2D or 3D texture that I was getting here is less of like stones of Warpstone sticking through, or rocks or clumps, and more of hills and valleys of Warpstone. So it adds some texture, it adds some 3D interest to it, but it wasn't exactly what I was going for. Something like Astrogranite Debris might be a little bit better, or just using some like fine grit to give that nice sharp edges. So why we have 2 here? Why didn't I just throw Warpstone Lightning over this? Well, I threw Warpstone Lightning over both of them to begin with, and then with this one, it's another layer of Warpstone Lightning that's applied to it, and it turns out pretty good. And then here, instead of doing 2 layers of Warpstone Lightning, I did Warpstone Lightning and a layer of Dark Angel's Green, the Dark Angel's Green being mostly used to fill in the shade. Honestly, you really can't tell the difference. It's not obvious on camera, and I keep on having a hard time telling which one is which, and honestly, I may have gotten them switched around yet again, but when it comes right down to it, it didn't really matter. Just switching up the paint, I don't think helped much, so just do 2 layers of Warpstone Lightning. It is going to get you what you want. As I said, I would use, if you were going to try and texture it, I'd use something with a little bit more of a sharp texture to see how that turns out. But overall, this, I think, turned out well. I've come up with what I'm going to be doing my skaven in, which is this version here. The reason I went with this version over the textured versions is, though the textured versions gave more of what I was originally envisioning, it comes at the cost of having to put another layer of paint down, specifically the Astrogranite, and the texture take a while to dry. So we're already putting 2 layers of contrast paint on this, and a layer of Mordant Earth, which takes overnight to dry. I don't really want to. I don't feel I'm gaining much by texturizing it. That extra layer of painting is going to be worth it. So for me, this was the best option to go with. So Seer, contrast light or Warp Lightning, contrast paint, and then Mordant Earth. Simple, easy. It really worked really well. The only thing that you might, depending on what the look you're going for is, you may want to consider dry brushing this afterwards with like a dark gray or even a lighter gray to give it more of a stone-like texture, or you could use something like Warpstone Green or Moot Green dry brush to give it more of an OSL effect. For what I'm doing, I think this works well the way it is, so I think I'm going to stick with that. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this informative. If you did, please give the video a like. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. I have my various social media links down there. You can follow me on those. Twitter is probably the best place to follow me if you want more updates. I do some things like works in progress and such if you want to see on Instagram. If you know anyone that would find this informative or might try experimenting with it, please share it with them. And other than that, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.